Good afternoon. The next item of business is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio this afternoon is Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands. And at question number 1, I call Ros McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what recent engagement it has had with the UK Government regarding how to ensure the protection of Scotch whisky.
Cabinet Secretary Mary Goujon.
The Scottish Government takes the protection of Scotch whisky and all our iconic food and drink products very seriously. I had actually hoped to raise this at the interministerial group. However, this was disappointingly cancelled at short notice. However, I will be taking this important issue up with DEFRA at the earliest opportunity to share our concerns and the concerns of the industry at the proposals to redefine what is considered single malt. Now, whisky is, of course, a vital employer, particularly in our rural and island communities, and with £5.4 billion worth of exports last year, it is a significant contributor to our economy, and we will continue to work shoulder to shoulder with the sector to address any attempts to undermine confidence in our iconic single malt whisky.
Ros McCall.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, and that's exactly what I want to question. The success and growth of Scotch whisky is a story which we're all familiar, and in 2023 Scotch whisky accounted for 74% of Scottish food and drink exports, and 22% of all food and drink exports in the last year's exports was estimated to be worth £5.4 billion. Now, in my own region of Mid-Scotland and Fife, there are many successful distilleries, including Deanston, Glengoyne, Glenturret, Tullybarden, Lindores Abbey and Kinbarns, to name but a few. It was therefore extremely concerning to hear, as the Cabinet Secretary has alluded to, that the UK Government's Food Security Minister is still open to the possibility of allowing an English single malt application to be given the green light. Single malt is seen as a premium product for a reason. It's handcrafted, using traditional methods, utilising.
I do need a question, Ms McCall.
So, will the Cabinet Secretary commit today to pressurising the UK Government more extensively on this point to ensure the protection of Scotland's iconic brand?
Cabinet Secretary.
I am in full agreement with everything that Ros McCall has set out there, and I know that you mentioned a number of distilleries were mentioned in the member's own region, as well as more broadly across Scotland. I mean, I think the economic impact and importance of our Scotch whisky industry is clear for everyone to see. So that's why we'll continue to do everything within our power to try and pressure the UK Government into ensuring that our iconic product is well recognised. But again, it is unfortunate that we had one opportunity to do that earlier this week, and that was cancelled at short notice, but we will continue to make that point to ministers at DEFRA.
Supplementary, Gordon MacDonald.
Before the Tories forced Brexit in Scotland, whisky had the protection of an EU geographical indication. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that Scotland's produce, like whisky, will never be amply protected as long as Westminster governments, either Labour or Tory, have the power to legislate and undermine the interests of Scottish business?
Cabinet Secretary.
I recognise the point that the member has raised there, and of course following Brexit, when it comes to geographical indication holders, these were transitioned over and then offered protection through the UK scheme, though of course that is less well known than the previous scheme that we were part of as members of the EU. But of course I do agree with Gordon MacDonald on the wider point, because our whisky, salmon, beef, lamb, our cheese are some of the finest products from anywhere in the world, and anyone undermining the protection afforded to them by including lesser products really is playing with fire when it comes to these issues. So, of course, we'll continue to do all we can to ensure that these iconic products are protected.
And supplementary, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotch whisky's GI in Brazil, announced last August, took 10 years to negotiate. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree that it is deeply troubling for the United Kingdom to potentially have more than one definition of single malt, and it would actually be damaging to some of these negotiations by the industry around the world when they are trying to secure further definitions of this iconic Scottish product?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would agree with the member on that, and again I'll continue to do all that I can in my role in liaising with UK Government ministers to ensure that any definition of single malt isn't watered down in any way. Unfortunately, the process is still ongoing. We know that the consultation is open until the 20th of May, but we will certainly be making those representations to the UK Government.
Question number 2, Emma Roddick.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is engaging with Highlands and Islands communities on the future of land reform policy.
Cabinet Secretary.
I fully understand the cultural, economic and social importance of land reform and community ownership to people across the Highlands and Islands, and I will always ensure that their views are heard in the development of policy. Now, in the development of the current land reform bill, we consulted with rural communities across Scotland, including public meetings in Helmsdale, Glenmoriston and Stornoway. Our proposals will bring real improvements to the way land is owned and managed across Scotland, and we'll soon consult on the Community Right to Buy review, where the views of Highlands and Islands communities communities will again be crucial.
Emma Roddick.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I, like many, was deeply concerned to see the sale of Slate Peninsula, given the response of community members who are surprised and worried that they won't get a say in what happens to the land next. I have written to the Cabinet Secretary seeking her support and asking her to convene a meeting of relevant stakeholders. It should be a given that communities get the chance and any available support to purchase land when it enters the market. So can the Cabinet Secretary speak to how the Land Reform Bill will support communities like Slate, and is there any support that she can offer them in the meantime?
Cabinet Secretary.
I want to thank Emma Roddick for raising that important issue, and again it was one that we'd actually covered in the debate on land reform which took place last week, because this is an example of where a local community hasn't been consulted or made aware of the landowner's intention to sell, and that's exactly the type of issue that we will be trying to address should the Land Reform Bill be passed by this Parliament, because had the transparency proposals in this bill been enforced, the local community would have received that prior notification of the landowner's intention to sell. Now, I haven't yet seen the letter that Emma Roddick has sent to me, but of course I will consider that and see what more we can do to help the communities. Thank you.
Supplementary. Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In considering that, would the Cabinet Secretary look at intervening and asking the Clandonald Lands Trust to put the sale on pause, to enable the community to look at what is happening and perhaps come up with a bid themselves or in some way influence the sale of the land?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, I want to thank Rhoda Grant for raising that question with me and also for highlighting the issue in Chamber last week. Now, I would obviously have to go and see what powers there would be there, but again, I think that's why we actually need this bill to pass through the Parliament, so that we have the opportunity there to prevent situations like this happening again. But I'm more than happy to follow up with Rhoda Grant on that.
Question number 3, Eleanor Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its consideration of a fisheries management plan for the future management of wild wrasse.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has commissioned Seafish to undertake initial scoping work to help inform our approach to fisheries management plans for non-quota species, including wrasse. The Scottish Government has been clear that our resources are currently focused on delivering the statutory commitment in the UK Fisheries Act and the UK Joint Fisheries Statement for the production of 43 fisheries management plans, of which the Scottish Government is the lead coordinating authority for 21.
Eleanor Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer and appreciate that she has recently agreed that appropriate assessments will be done regarding taking wrasse from special areas of conservation and marine protected areas. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the closure of the wrasse fishery between the 1st of December and the 30th of April is intended to protect wrasse species during the spawning season, protections which are a standard part of fisheries management plans?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would just want to offer that clarity that, yes, the closure is to protect wrasse species. But I think, as I outlined when I was giving evidence to the Rural Affairs Committee in relation to fisheries management plans, not having one in place doesn't mean that we won't be taking any action to look at what more we can do for this important species. And indeed, we have undertaken a number of measures over the course of the past few years. But of course, it is a matter that we continue to keep under review and to see what more we can do when it comes to wrasse.
Supplementary. Ariane Burgess, who's joining us remotely. Ms Burgess, could you put your camera on, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Ms Burgess.
Dr David Bailey, who was commissioned by NatureScot in 2019 to examine whether wrasse fishing could affect protected features, said, as a first measure, closing protected reefs to wrasse fishing would reduce the risk to protected features, ensure that at least some wrasse populations survive, and allow the ecological effects of wrasse fishing to be assessed. Does the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree it's important for the sake of our aquaculture industry, our marine environment and the commercial species that depend on them that at least some wrasse populations survive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Of course, wrasse is a very important species, and I hope I've been able to outline in my previous response, but also in response to the inquiry that the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee undertook in relation to aquaculture. We'd set out a number of measures there that we're looking to undertake. But I think what I would also outline, that obviously, and I think what we'd set out as part of our response to that report, was that we had received the report in relation to that just last year, the report that had been undertaken by Glasgow University, and on the back of that, and in light of that evidence, we're undertaking an appropriate assessment ahead of the wrasse fishery opening in May of this year. So I really just want to offer that assurance to Ariane Burgess and to other members that we are taking these matters seriously, because of course we've got to do what we can to ensure that we're protecting this species.
Question number 4 has been withdrawn. Question number 5, Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has made an assessment of the potential loss of agricultural land in the North East region as the result of development.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government has not made such an assessment at a national or a regional level. The Scottish Government holds multiple data sets relating to land use. However, they alone could not support an assessment of potential loss of agricultural land. Scotland's fourth land use strategy is due for publication by March in 2026. And throughout its development, we will be working with stakeholders regarding the multiple demands placed on our land and the fine balances that must be found as we move forward. For new development proposals, National Planning Framework 4, soils policy only supports development in limited circumstances if on prime agricultural land or on locally important agricultural land of lesser quality.
Tess White.
Minister and Cabinet Secretary, the industrialisation of the North East by SSEN's monster pylon plans is causing alarm and trauma. I recently met with Angus farmers who, along with other stakeholders, raised serious concerns with me about the impact of the overhead lines on prime agricultural land. There are also worrying implications for the use of farming machinery, including autonomous tractors. Has the Scottish Government considered the loss of agricultural productivity as a result of SSEN's plans, and will it commit to protect our food security and our farmers in the North East?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think in terms of the Scottish Government's commitment to protect not just the farmers of the North East but across the country is absolute. We have been absolutely crystal clear about that from day one. In terms of the specific area that she's talking about, the member's talking about, that is a local planning issue, and it should be for that local planning authority to decide what's happening in that area.
Question number 6, Graham Simpson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting the breeding of disease-resistant ash trees.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government invests in forest research and science, jointly funding research with the UK Government and other UK devolved administrations to further knowledge and understand in areas including tree pests and diseases, tree breeding and forest resilience. We are supporting plans for a clonal archive of resistant ash trees, which will be located in Scotland on the public forest estate. And this is part of ongoing work to support the breeding of disease-resistant ash trees.
Graham Simpson.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? He will know that breeding resistant ash is crucial to combating ash dieback disease. The Future Trees Trust have been leading the way on this in Scotland, working with the Woodland Trust to increase the volume of Scottish provenance ash in their breeding programme. But the funding programme has been suddenly cut, and that puts planting targets in jeopardy. So can the Minister agree to reconsider this so that we can get the programme back on track?
Minister.
In terms of the specific programme that Graham Simpson is talking about, I'm more than happy to follow up with him in writing.
Question number 7, Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to progress its ambition for Scotland to be a world leader in sustainable and regenerative agriculture practice.
Minister.
We are progressing the priorities set out in our vision for Scottish agriculture of high-quality food production, thriving businesses, climate action, nature restoration and a just transition. And we have maintained direct payments, launched the Whole Farm Plan and introduced the Agricultural and Rural Community Scotland Act. Through the Agricultural Reform Programme, we are working collaboratively to deliver a sustainable future for Scottish agriculture. We continue to prioritise the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, with the 2024 round awards increasing funding by £3.9 million on the previous year. The recently announced £14 million Future Farming Investment Scheme will encourage climate-friendly farming, support efficiency and environmental sustainability.
Monica Lennon.
I welcome the Minister's response and update. Clarity over the definition of sustainable and regenerative agriculture has come up during the scrutiny of the Land Reform Bill. Can I ask what the Government is doing to ensure there is a clear and consistent definition and that the aims underpinning the vision, strategy and other legislation are clearly understood?
Minister.
I understand the point that the member makes about the definition, but the Scottish Government are currently working on a code of practice which has been co-development with the industry in order to get a better understanding of what that looks like, and we'll bring those measures forward in due course.
I have had requests for 3 supplementaries. I intend to take all of them. And the first supplementary, Finlay Carson.
GM crops play a critical role in sustainable and regenerative agriculture by enhancing crop resilience to pest, disease and environmental stresses. This reduces the need for chemical inputs like pesticides and herbicides, therefore minimising environmental impact. Additionally, GM crops can improve yields and nutritional quality, contributing to food security and sustainable farming practices. Can the Minister update Parliament on discussions with stakeholders on bringing forward legislation with regards to GM and give members of an indication of timelines for setting the way forward?
Minister.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised at the member talking about GM crops, because that's an entirely different thing from the conversation we were having about gene-edited crops. Cabinet Secretary and myself very recently attended a round table to start the conversations about what this looks like going forward and whether there is a place for it here in Scotland.
Supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Between the agricultural property relief proposals and the National Insurance budget decisions, I'm not sure that Labour care much about Scottish agriculture, but can the Minister highlight the challenges that are posed to Scotland's ambitions to be a world leader by Labour's decision to end ring-fenced funding?
Minister.
Well, the UK Government's budget decisions have not delivered the support Scottish agriculture requires, and failing to reverse the real terms cuts of previous years, nor providing the multi-year certainty that the sector needs. The changes to both the APR and the BPR will reduce confidence and investment in the sector even further. Despite the UK Government's removal of ring-fence funding, our 2025-26 budget continues to ring-fence that funding for agriculture. So we continue to press the UK Government to commit to meaningful engagement across the 4 nations on the future funding settlement for agriculture, and to provide the certainty and assurances in the delivery of the post-EU agricultural policies.
And supplementary, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last night, many of us attended the Food and Drink Federation reception, and the agricultural sector is calling for certainty. Now, Minister, the enactment of Section 29 to bring forward the Code of Practice on Sustainable and Regenerative Agriculture is solely in the gift of Scottish ministers. So to enable investment in innovation and that confidence to the sector, can the Minister confirm when the Section 29 will come into force and when they will share the date of the code that will be published?
Minister.
I think the member would recognise that proper engagement and consultation with the sector is very important, so that when we do deliver that code of practice, it's got the full backing of the industry behind it. As I've already said, we're investing another £14 million just now in an innovation fund, and the Scottish Government has been absolutely committed, as it has demonstrated year after year, to be there right beside the Scottish agricultural industry.
And question number 8, Ash Regan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether its policy position in relation to an independent Scotland seeking to rejoin the EU includes rejoining the Common Fisheries Policy.
Cabinet Secretary.
As set out in our Building a New Scotland paper on our marine sector in an independent Scotland, the Common Fisheries Policy is an integral part of EU law. It's well established that members of the CFP, membership of that is a fundamental requirement of EU membership. Now, the Scottish Government supports the overarching principles and the strategic outcomes of the CFP and their role in supporting long-term sustainable fishing. An independent Scotland within the EU, as an influential maritime nation, would have a significant opportunity to shape the future of the policy and relevant legislative and regulatory developments.
Ash Regan.
Norway, which is a country similar in size to Scotland, is of course a member of the European Free Trade Association, giving access to the European Economic Area. And Norway thrives outside of the EU, but inside the single market, controlling its own waters, managing its own resources and delivering prosperity for its people. Does the Scottish Government accept that Norway offers a viable model for European trade for an independent Scotland, and what concrete steps is it taking to ensure that Scotland regains access to the single market?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member is right in that Norway offers another model and another alternative, but again it's the position of the Scottish Government that we would seek to rejoin the EU and to rejoin the EU as an independent nation, because although Norway is outside of the CFP, when you look at EU members such as Norway, they're required to implement the vast majority of EU law, but then they have little little or no involvement in terms of how those laws are made. So that's why we would want to be an independent member state and be members of the EU, because we would then have the power and the ability to then shape that and to work for the benefit of Scotland.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on rural affairs, land reform and islands. There will be a very short pause before we move on to the next portfolio to allow frontbench teams to change position. Thank you. Thank you. So we will now move on to the next portfolio this afternoon, which is health and social care. And at question number 1, I call Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many NHS boards have designated single-sex spaces for women.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is a matter for individual boards who must ensure that all their facilities comply with relevant legislation, including the Equality Act 2010. Responsibility for complying with the requirements of the Equality Act 2010 rests with individual organisations. This Act is enforced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which has produced guidance to support separate and single-sex service providers.
Megan Gallagher.
This is a really basic question, and I'm finding it really difficult that the Cabinet Secretary cannot tell me today in the Chamber how many NHS boards have single-sex spaces for women. Worse still, ministers have told Parliament committees that they have no clue whether hospitals and health boards in Scotland are following the law. This is about dignity. This is about women's safety. So will the Minister urgently write to all health boards in Scotland to find out what their policies on single-sex spaces for women are, and once the responses are received, whether the Cabinet Secretary would be able to share these responses with MSPs?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, as I said at the outset, it is a matter for individual boards as it is for all employing organisations, to ensure that they are complying with the law. We'll continue to interact with boards to ensure that the guidance that's been produced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission is being maintained, and we'll keep Parliament updated on that progress.
And supplementary, Cara Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Government has repeatedly failed to say how it is ensuring that all health and safety workplace regulations are being complied with in regard to single-sex toilets. I have asked the Government this before. Can the Government provide any assurance that it will take some responsibility and look to assess the current situation in our NHS and other organisations, particularly ones in which the Government provide public funds, gather the data? It should not be difficult, but I do think it's essential.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Carol Mochan for a question, but the Scottish Government expects all relevant organisations to comply with the requirements of the 2010 Act and other legislation that Carol Mochan references in their role as employers, such as the requirements of the law on health and safety in workplaces as outlined in the Workplace Health and Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992. That expectation to follow the rule of law is clear, and we would expect boards and other public organisations to adhere to it.
A supplementary, Stephen Kerr.
Is the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care really telling us that he doesn't know how many of Scotland's health boards are complying with the law? Has he not taken the time to ask that question? And if he hasn't, what on earth is he doing?
Cabinet Secretary.
I am not the employer of staff within the health service. The staff are employed by individual health boards, and it is their responsibility to ensure that they are adhering to the law. I've made very clear my expectations to Megan Gallagher and to Carol Mochan that not just in terms of the Equality Act, but also in terms of all elements of legislation and regulation, that they do comply with the law, and that expectation is very clear.
Question number 2, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress of Action 42 in the Cancer Action Plan 2023 to 2026 to carry out a clinically led review on cancer waiting times.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Action 42 of the 3-year Cancer Action Plan commits to carrying out a clinically led review of latest data and evidence to determine whether there is merit in specific, additional or alternative cancer waiting time standards for different types of cancer and cancer treatment. The Government has been putting in place arrangements for this review, which will be underway shortly. The review will require significant clinical leadership with appropriate engagement across a range of stakeholders. A project steering group is being established which will support the review, determining if any amendments to the standards would enhance patient experience and meet the needs of the NHS for the future.
Neil Bibby.
I thank the Minister for that response. I submitted this question on behalf of Breast Cancer Now before the sad passing of our colleague Christina McKelvey, and I want to pay tribute to Christina McKelvey, who was a strong advocate for breast cancer awareness. My thoughts are with her friends and family at this difficult time. Presiding Officer, the 62-day target from urgent referral to starting treatment has sadly not been met for 4 years for breast cancer. Breast Cancer Now estimate that during this time, had the target been met, over 1,000 more people would have had a timely diagnosis and access to potentially life-saving treatments. The 62-day standard states that 95% of eligible patients should wait no longer than 62 days from urgent suspicion of cancer referral to first cancer treatment. However, currently the 62 standard is only being met by 1 of the 14 NHS boards. Does the Scottish Government agree that waiting time targets for cancer need to be reviewed so health boards and the Scottish Government can firstly identify, then address the causes of the delay?
Minister.
I thank Neil Bibby for his question and recognise the sentiments he introduced his supplementary question with, and my heart goes out to Christina McKelvey's family and friends and loved ones. This morning I met with Make Second Count, another breast cancer charity, and we had long discussions about research and the options of getting on clinical trials. So it's something that's very close to my heart. I recognise the question behind Mr Bibby's question around waiting times, and recognise that we do need to improve the service, and that's what the Scottish Government is investing in.
Question number 3, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will commit to renewing the Heart Disease Action Plan.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We're exploring a new long-term conditions strategy to better recognise the fact that many people living with long-term conditions, including heart disease, need the same types of support and care regardless of their condition. We will shortly launch a full public consultation on this strategy, and we plan to publish a long-term conditions framework before the end of 2025, with action plans following thereafter.
Colin Smith.
In June, the Cross-Party Group on Heart and Circulatory Disease, which I co-convened, published our inquiry report on the implementation of the current plan. We heard strong support for a specific heart disease plan, but concerns that a lack of focus and investment was impacted on the implementation. Figures, for example, from BHF Scotland showed waiting times for cardiology and key diagnostic tests are the longest on record. How will the Minister ensure that the Scottish Government and NHS Scotland provide sufficient resource and focus to address what remains one of the leading causes of death and ill health in Scotland? And will the Minister commit to specific actions in any long-term condition strategy that address the unique needs of people affected by heart disease?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank Colin Smith for his supplementary question and recognise the huge amount of work that he has done as a member of the Heart Conditions CPG. I had a meeting last week with the British Heart Foundation where we were discussing exactly what was behind Colin Smith's question, and I recognise that there is an importance that needs to be kept with regard to heart conditions in Scotland, but also recognise that there are a number of areas of care for heart conditions that could be replicated across other long-term conditions. To that end, I have met with cardiologists and other heart clinicians just last week, and also had a visit to the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh to see more about what they are doing around diagnostics. So I absolutely understand where Mr Smith's question is coming from and commit to ensuring that I continue to work closely with those that are living with heart conditions.
And supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Minister, the issue you've just talked about there is not being covered across many of the health boards that we've seen from the cross-party group. There seems to still be a postcode lottery when it comes to individuals receiving the care and attention they require. And having this disease action plan for the heart is vitally important. Clinicians and practitioners have come to the cross-party group to express their concerns. And I've heard what you've said so far, but I'm still not convinced, Minister, that that action plan and the way forward is going to be addressed in the short term.
Minister. So I thank Alexander Stewart for his follow-up and recognise the work that he does within the CPG as well. That was exactly why last week that I met with members of our cardiac clinical advisory team to discuss exactly the differences of service across. And I am working with other members of the Scottish Government to look at a task and finish group to move forward to ensure we have the best heart disease support and care within Scotland.
Question number 4, Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it was aware that prior to NHS Highlands taking over responsibility for vaccination services from GPs, there were reported concerns that the NHS Board's system did not allow GPs to know their patients' vaccination status, and that this could therefore lead to a heightened patient risk.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Since April 2022, health boards have been responsible for delivering vaccines, and the vast majority of adult vaccinations, including flu, COVID, RSV, shingles and pneumococcal, are visible to GPs via their GPIT system. Currently, childhood and non-routine vaccinations do not automatically flow into GPIT from the separate systems that record them, but this predates the move from GP to health board delivery, as Fergus Ewing outlined. Some health boards may have data sharing arrangements in place with GP practices. This allows health board vaccination teams direct access to patient records to add vaccination history without GPs being required to do this manually, and this should be explored locally wherever possible. And any associated patient risk is mitigated by health boards providing GPs with a list of childhood and non-routine vaccines that they have administered, and the Scottish Government funds GPs to manually input these into their GP systems.
Fergus Ewing.
Yes, but the health board system has already failed. One infant lost her life because her mother didn't get the vaccination letter offer until it was too late. The Cabinet Secretary knows this was the case. His officials knew that when they brought in this system, the information about who had been vaccinated could not be shared with GPs at that time. And the paper chase of doing it thousands of inputs just doesn't work, Cabinet Secretary. Surely the service must be returned to local GPs, and that is necessary to prevent the risk of further loss of life in the Highlands. And I know that's something that we all wish to avoid, but the advice I've had from GPs is that that risk is heightened because they don't know who has been vaccinated and who hasn't, because the civil servants advising you allowed this system to be brought in, when in fact it's a reckless risk to public health.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank Fergus Ewing for his question and indeed for his engagement and the engagement of the GPs that he represents over a number of meetings with me. It's not true to say that GPs do not know who is vaccinated. As I've just outlined, boards provide GPs with a list of vaccinations they've administered across the vaccination programmes for practices to manually enter them into GP systems. I recognise the point that Fergus Ewing makes there around the cumbersome nature of that task, but there is funding in place to allow that to happen, and that is not a novel situation. The Scottish Government has not obstructed any changes in the vaccination model used in NHS Highland. Indeed, the board has followed the process set out in legislation required to change its model. It's for NHS Highland to examine the evidence in its area and determine the model appropriate to these circumstances. And we have facilitated that move to this new proposed model for exactly the reasons that Fergus Ewing sets out, in order to make sure we protect public health and we continue to save lives.
Supplementary, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The issue that Fergus Ewing raises in NH Highland actually highlights the need, does it not, Cabinet Secretary, to start to adopt a basic national collaboration and communication platform that allows all healthcare professionals, with the permission of patients, to access basic health data that is important to the delivery of safe patient care and bring the Scottish National Healthcare Service into the modern world.
Cabinet Secretary.
And I believe that is something that the new NHS app and the digital front door will allow a greater expansion of, and I'm pleased that NHS Lanarkshire will start the rollout of that later this year, very much based upon the COVID-19 pandemic new vaccine recording system that was built, the vaccine management tool, as well as the National Clinical Data Store, which stores the information collected via the vaccine management tool. This gives us a good platform with which to build the very system that Brian Whittle is asking for.
Question number 5, Katie Clark.
To ask the Scottish Government how many patients in hospital are waiting for a social care package assessment from North Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership.
Minister Marie Todd.
The latest published statistics from Public Health Scotland show that as of the 3rd of March 2025, 6 people were waiting in hospital for a social care assessment in North Ayrshire. Over the last 12 months, on average, 3 people were recorded as waiting for a social care assessment in hospital in North Ayrshire, and no more than 12 people at any one point. The same publication also shows that on 3rd March 2025, 44 people were waiting in hospital for a care-at-home package in North Ayrshire, 30 more than in the same week of 2024, 14 on 4th March 2024. The latest published statistics on delayed discharge also show that as of 30th January, 15 people were delayed in North Ayrshire due to awaiting a social care assessment, and a further 46 people were delayed in hospital due to awaiting completion of care arrangements, primarily for care-at-home services. The statistics may well include patients who are delayed in hospitals which are out with their Health Board area of residence, and it is important that I point that out.
Katie Clark.
A constituent of mine has been in touch who has been in hospital ready for discharge since 17th November, given North Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership have been unable to provide a care package. I am making representations, but what advice does the Cabinet Secretary have? And does she think that is the longest that a patient is currently in hospital? And what is being done to ensure that we stop this happening, given the waste of resource?
Minister.
So the member will be aware that we are investing in social care in order to provide support for people who need to access it. And whilst we have overall responsibility for health and social care support policy in Scotland, it is for local authorities and health and social care partnerships to ensure that social care support services are in place to provide people with the appropriate support in the right place and in the right time. Our budget for 25-26 sets out almost £2.2 billion investment in social care and integration, exceeding our commitment to increase investment during this term of Parliament. We have Scottish Government has very regular meetings with all our local systems, and I'd be very comfortable if the member were to furnish me with more details of the individual, to consider raising the individual's case with the local system who have responsibility both statutorily and operationally for delivery of a care package to her.
Question number 6, Wilson McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is in place for people with the condition Turnpenny-Fry syndrome.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government remains committed to improving the lives of people living with conditions like Turnpenny-Fry syndrome. Genetic tests for TFS is accessed through one of Scotland's 4 regional clinical genetics services, who provide essential support to families after diagnosis, including genetic counselling and guidance on any further testing that may be necessary.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Minister for that response. Just last week, my constituent Paul Kelly contacted me about support for his 7-year-old daughter Harper, who I believe is the only individual in Scotland diagnosed with Turnpenny-Fry syndrome, and one of only 5, I am told, in the UK. Mr Kelly advised me that due to the rareness of this condition, the family are struggling to get Harper any support and feeling they are being passed between different health agencies. This lack of support even includes very practical things, such as not being able to get incontinence products from the Health Board. Now, I have to say, since contact from both Mr Kelly and my office, NHS Lanarkshire, have reached out to the family, and I hope this contact will lead to appropriate supports being put in place. However, I think there is a bigger issue, and I would ask the Minister, given that I am now raising this very rare condition for my constituent here today, quite possibly for the first time in this chamber, what steps the Scottish Government can take to ensure there is more research on Turnpenny-Fry syndrome, so that those diagnosed just now and in the future can get the help they need or are entitled to expect.
Minister.
Thank you. I am very sorry to hear of the difficulties that Harper's family have been experiencing, and I can assure members that the Scottish Government expects NHS boards to provide safe, effective and person-centred care, and I do hope that the Kelly family are now getting that appropriate support. We know how important research is to those affected by ultra-rare conditions. Very small numbers of those diagnosed brings unique challenges in supporting clinical trials, and I was very pleased to attend the Rare Conditions Disease Day in March in the Parliament, where there were some very moving and powerful speeches by those living with rare conditions. We know how important research is, and Scottish researchers can apply to the Chief Scientist Office and UK National Institute for Health and Care Research for specific projects. However, for ultra-rare conditions, collaboration across the UK and internationally is essential for sharing expertise, such as with the Horizon Europe Partnership on Rare Diseases.
Question number 7, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what steps it is taking to improve GP retention.
Cabinet Secretary.
Are essential to the delivery of high-quality, sustainable general practice. In November 2024, I published a plan with a suite of 20 actions to improve GP recruitment and retention, and this includes reshaping the GP retainer scheme to provide GPs with flexible support when needed, expanding the RCGP leadership scheme to support mid-career retention, and establishing early career fellowships to help newly qualified GPs develop the skills for a career in general practice. We have also invested an additional £13.6 million this financial year to support the retention of key general practice staff.
Colin Beattie.
The Royal College of GPs and the British Medical Association say some practices are freezing recruitment due to financial pressures. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what steps are the Scottish Government taking to reduce costs for GP practices to enable them to hire more GPs?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer, and I thank Colin Beattie for his question. I recognise the challenges that there are at this time for general practice, and I regularly engage with the Royal College of GPs and the BMA. Indeed, last week I met with the chair of the GP committee of the BMA in Morrison, and I met with the entirety of the BMA committee this morning to understand their concerns. We have invested an additional £73 million in general practice this financial year, including £13.6 million to support GPs to retain and recruit key staff. The increases in national insurance contributions from the UK Government introduced in their autumn statement have created additional costs for practices, impacting on their ability to recruit. And in November last year, I published the plan to improve GP recruitment and retention, including retaining our newly qualified GPs in Scotland. And I'll continue to engage with the Royal College, with the BMA, with the local medical committees to ensure that we have a thriving GP community going forward.
Supplementary, Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, Udny Station GP surgery in my region is the latest casualty of the SNP's chronic mismanagement of primary care. A lack of clinical workforce, rising operational costs and population growth mean the surgery is set to close its doors, leaving the rural communities in the lurch. And this is not the first time I've mentioned this, Cabinet Secretary. Why is the SNP government still failing to resource GP surgeries such as Udny to meet the needs of rural populations, and what action will it take to address this unacceptable situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I must challenge Tess White's characterisation, because we have invested an additional £73 million in general practice. The 25-26 budget includes over £2.2 billion investment in primary care. It will take our spending on wider primary care to over 11% of the total 2025-26 health and social care resource budget. We have seen an increase in the headcount number of general practitioners by over 300, and we have expanded the wider multidisciplinary team to approaching 5,000 staff. So the characterisation that Tess White comes forward with is just not true. However, I recognise that there are challenges that remain, and I recognise the particular challenges that there are in rural and island communities. I obviously understand that, given my background, and I will continue to engage, as I said in response to Colin Beattie, with the BMA, with the Royal Colleges, to ensure that we can support general practice in all parts of the country going forward.
Supplementary, Willie Rennie.
But the Cabinet Secretary knows that this isn't working just now. The demand is going up, the responsibilities are going up for GPs, but the funding, the share of the NHS spend, has almost halved since 2004. So what is the Cabinet Secretary doing to make sure that GPs can be recruited to local practices because they can afford it, by reversing that trend in the decline of NHS funding? Cabinet Secretary.
Pointed Tess White to the picture in terms of the funding that we've put forward in the budget around the share of funding that goes to primary care, but I recognise the concern that Willie Rennie puts forward in terms of the demand that there is upon general practice, and the shared vision that I have is shared by the Royal College and by the BMA in terms of what general practice can do for us going forward to have a sustainable, preventative health service. So I'll continue working with them. I will commit the resource that I'm able to in order to see their continued stabilisation, sustainability and onward growth.
A brief supplementary for Chaudhry.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Medical Director of Lothian Local Medical Committee recently stated that many practices can no longer afford to take on additional GPs, and some are at risk of going bust. Given the Cabinet Secretary announced £13.9 million for general practice staffing in November, can he advise what impact this will have on GPs' retention, and specifically how many new GPs the Scottish Government expects it will hire?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I recognise the concerns that are expressed by the Lothian Medical Committee, because I met with them alongside Paul McLennan in his constituency capacity just last week. And we had a very good conversation about how we can sustain and improve the position for general practice going forward. I recognise the financial challenges that are there, that have been exacerbated and made worse by the increased employer national insurance contributions that have been meted out by the UK Government. But in spite of that, we will do all that we can to make sure the resources allocated to increase the number of GPs and the wider practice staff and support their role within the primary care system to deliver for the people of Scotland.
And I can squeeze in question number 8, if I could please have succinct questions and answers to match. So, Marie McNair.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment has been made regarding the potential impact that community link workers have on the social determinants of health.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. General practice community link workers play an important role, a critical role, in addressing the social determinants of health. Social determinants like debt, social isolation and housing can have a negative impact on people's health. In such cases, link workers provide crucial support by linking people with community resources. There is good evidence from local data and evaluations from wider research on the positive impact of community link working. And our national review of community link workers will look to expand the existing evidence base, including improving the consistency of data that health and social care partnerships and link worker services collect.
Marie McNair.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Community link workers in my constituency are a vital service to the most deprived communities. The Labour-led Western Barnshire Council have cut this service, despite the council receiving the highest per head of population settlement of any mainland local authority. This decision has rightly been criticised by many, including the GMB trade union. So will the Cabinet Secretary join me in condemning these Labour cuts and call on them to be reversed? Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Marie McNair for her question. I too have concerns about planned cuts to link workers in Western Bartonshire and the impact this may have on patients, particularly patients from low incomes. We know the clear and inextricable link that there is between poverty and ill health and poverty and barriers to accessing healthcare. I understand that the Integrated Joint Board met last week to confirm its 25-26 budget and agreed to reduce link worker posts from 9 whole-time equivalent posts to 5. I would stress that the principle that link worker capacity should be targeted towards the greatest patient need, and my officials will continue to work with local partners to be clear about this principle.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on health and social care. There will be a brief pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position should we so wish. Point of order, Murdo Fraser.